Hi folks, welcome back to Sidetracks Board Game Club in Elwood City. About a year ago, I did a series of top 50 videos with my 50 favorite board games. And I was thinking the other day, it might be time to revisit that. I was watching the Dice Tower, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels related to board games. And every year they do a top 100 board games. And I got to thinking, a lot has changed in the last year since I did my list. And for one, Sidetracks didn't exist at the time other than in my head. But since Sidetracks is open, I've got a chance to play games a lot. And I've met a lot of new people, played games with the newer folks. I've had to teach a lot of games. I've also been able to pull some old games off the shelf, particularly thanks to my friend Donovan. He has a binder with a list of every game in our Sidetracks library, and one of his objectives is to come in and play every single game. So he has caused me to go back and refresh my memory on some of these games that I haven't played in a long time. And plus, we're adding new games to their library every month. So I've got to play some new games this year as well. So I thought it might be time to refresh my top 50 list. So here we go. This is my top 50 favorite board games of all time. Number 50 is a game that I've had for a long time, but for some reason it just didn't click with me when I first played it. And I just recently brought it back off the shelf and played it a couple times and realized, this is a pretty cool game. And that game is called Sansoucci. And this is a tile laying game, but it's also a card playing game. You play different cards and you're building a garden in France. And your nobles are going to, go for a stroll out in the garden, and you build arbors and fountains and statues to make a pretty garden, but you're also trying to score points at the same time. And I'm not sure why it didn't hit with me the first time around, but now that I've gotten it back on the table and played it a couple more times, I really like it because it's not a long game, it's not hard to teach, and it's a lot of fun. It gives you a lot of interesting choices. So, my number 50, Sansoucci. My number 49 game was on the list last year, a little bit higher, but it's dropped about 7 places, and that is Council of Four. Council of Four is a little bit meatier game. It's an economic game, which I like a lot. And in this game, you are trying to put merchants out around the board. So it's an area control game, almost like Risk, except you're not battling. You're basically trying to fight each other economically. And you're trying to build a network of merchants on your board. And each time you place a merchant, you get some kind of bonus. Well, if you place a merchant in a nearby city that's connected, then that merchant then triggers the bonus for their city and the one that you already have connected. And so when you put your third one out, you can trigger, and you're generating lots of really cool stuff. But there are also some other bonuses in the game, so you have to decide, am I going to try to sort of organically grow my network, or am I going to try to jump on those early bonuses? And at first I kind of thought this game was broken because it seemed like jumping on the early bonus strategy was always the way to go, and that was the way to win. But the last time I played it, actually, the person who built the strongest network ended up winning the game. And that kind of convinced me that this game maybe isn't broken, and we just need to dive into it a little bit further. But it's really cool. You have to bribe. Each region of the board is controlled by different councils of government. And you have to bribe these people in order to get business permits to be able to do business in their city. So it's, a lot like real life. So there's bribery, and then there's these economic engines, and it's a really cool, fun game. That's Council of Four. My number 48 game has dropped quite a bit on my list. Last time around it was in the 20s, and now it's dropped about 20 spots down to 48. And this game is designed by Alan Moon, who also designed Ticket to Ride, which is a pretty famous game. And it's very similar in its mechanisms. And this game's called Airlines Europe. And in this game, instead of building train routes around the board, you're basically building airline routes around the board. Except in Ticket to Ride, when you play that game, you're connecting your color of train. And so you're building your network. In this game, it adds a stock market mechanism to it. And so I don't own any particular route. Other people can build on whatever color airlines they want to build on. But then we're also competing to see who has the majority shareholder in each of these different airlines by buying up the stock in the game. And it's a really cool game. It's not heavy at all, and it's pretty easy to learn, pretty easy to teach. It's nothing fancy, but for an introductory stock market game, a lot of times you play a stock market game, they tend to be very complex. And this one I would suggest if you are interested in dipping your toes maybe into a little bit heavier economic game, but you don't want to, get into something super heavy. Airlines Europe is really cool. Number 47 on my list is a game that's brand new to the list. And it's brand new to the list because before this year I didn't have this game and I had never played it before. And this is what's called a roll and write game. Or a flip and write game. But basically each person has their own dry erase board, and you're going to either roll dice or you're going to flip cards over, and then you're going to make, decisions on your board. And each other person around the table uses the same dice or uses the same cards, but their board's going to end up looking a whole lot different than yours by the end of the game. And for me, my number 47 is Welcome To. And this game is really cool because it's set in sort of 1950s post-World War II suburbia, and you're trying to build out your best residential neighborhood, and you can build swimming pools in some of the backyards, and you can build parks on the street to get more points. And it's really just a whole bunch of different ways to get points. But there's a little bit of theme to it. And it's cool. They also have a bunch of expansions for this game. And so there's like an Easter egg expansion with an Easter theme. There's a Christmas expansion where if you connect certain things, you basically extend the Christmas lights to score points. And so there's a Halloween version, there's a zombie version, there's like, all it is different maps that you play. And so this is a really cool game because it has a lot of variety. And again, another simple game. One of the things that I've learned this year from doing sidetracks is the games that are easy to teach and easy for me to introduce to other people tend to be the games that I really like. One, because I play them a lot more, but also I just don't have the mental capacity or the stamina to wade through a 20-page rulebook and try to put something really heavy on the table to teach people. So a lot of times these lighter games are the ones that I gravitate to and the ones that I enjoy as well. My number 46 is also a new game to the list, but this one isn't new to our collection. This game's been around for a long time, but because of that factor of teaching it to people, it's risen on my list and got into my top 50 just because I've introduced it to some new people at the shop over the last year and just kind of realized and remembered how great a game this is. And this is Bang the Dice Game. Bang the Dice Game is great because you can play it with a pretty big group of people, and it's actually a better game with more people. And this is a social deduction game. One person plays as the sheriff, and everybody knows who the sheriff is. But then there's also a group of outlaws and a group of renegades. And the outlaws are trying to kill the sheriff. The renegade, he's trying to kill everybody. But he tries to kill the outlaws first because if the sheriff dies, then the outlaws are going to win. But the trick is, you don't know who anybody is except for the sheriff. And so you're trying to figure out who's on your team and who's not. There's also a deputy. Depending on the number of players, there can be deputies that are helping the sheriff, but the sheriff doesn't even know who their deputies are. So you may be attacking somebody and not realize that person's on my team. And this game does have player elimination, where if you lose a certain number of life points, you're out. But the game goes so fast that it kind of doesn't matter, because even if you get booted out of the game's only going to take another 5 or 10 minutes, and then you're right back in, you shuffle up and you play it again. So Bang the Dice game is a great group game, great party game to introduce new people to this type of social deduction. Number 45 on my list has dropped just a few spots from last year. And no reason really. I still love this game. It's from one of my favorite board game designers, Elizabeth Hargrave. And this game, it's a nature theme. My wife and I tend to really love nature themed games. This game is called Mariposas. And Mariposas is such a neat theme. It's about butterfly migration from Mexico up into the United States and Canada. And so you have these first generation butterflies at the beginning of the game, and they're basically going to spread out around the board. And then eventually, by the end of the game, those butterflies will die, but you'll be spawning additional generations of butterflies. And by the end of the game, you want your level 4 butterflies to come back to Mexico where they started. And it mirrors the actual patterns that happen in nature. But the cool thing about this game is you can try to go for short-term points and spread out and hit some different marks to gain points during the game, or you could play that long game and try to get your generation 4 butterflies back to Mexico and get the points at the end game. And that makes for some really interesting decisions. This game actually, the more I've played it with a higher player count recently. In the past, I would just play this 2 players. A lot of times it would just be me and Joanne playing it. And it's okay at 2 players, but there are certain things that are hard to do with 2 players. There's a set collection thing with the cards, and a lot of times you can't really do that, or you don't know where those cards are. With more players, I think it's a better game. I think probably 4 players is a great number for this game, because when you go to the different cities, you can flip over these tiles and it'll show you, if you go here, you're going to get this red card or this blue card. And a lot of times you don't know where those are or how to get those if you're only playing 2 players, because you can only explore so much of the board with 2 people. But with 4 people, everybody starts spreading out and they start exploring these parts of the board. Well, when they find something, you could jump over there and go get it too. And so it makes it a lot easier to collect things, and so it gives you a little more strategy and sort of opens up the game a little bit. So I like it a lot with 4 players, and I think I'll probably get this game to the table more, play it less with lower player counts and start to play it more with a higher player count. And that's Mariposas. Number 44 on my list is another game that's new to the top 50, but it's not a new game for me. This one's been on my shelf for quite a while, and played it a few times at the beginning, but for whatever reason, I don't feel like I really appreciated the decision space in this game. It's a little bit crunchier if you let it. It's a little bit crunchier than maybe it lets on at the beginning, because it's got cartoony type artwork and it looks like a nice little friendly family game, but it actually can be a little more than that. And this game's called Pioneer Days. In fact, I just taught this game today to my after school club, and one of the things I love about this game, it's a dice drafting game. And so there's a lot of good player interaction in this game. There are storms. You're basically going out on the Oregon Trail or on, one of the Santa Fe Trail, these Western migration paths, and you have to fight off storms. There's raids by bandits. You're doing a cattle drive along the way, and your cows can die of famine if you don't have the money to pay for food. You also have to get medicine to take care of your people. And so there's a lot of different paths you can take, and you can acquire these different people to join your crew, to join your group. And those people can help you score points, and they can also give you some special abilities. And so, maybe you want to go with a big cattle drive scenario, and you want to get a ranch hand and a bunch of cowboys on your team, right? That can sort of dictate your strategy in one direction. Or maybe you want to go with, a money scheme where you're just trying to buy lots of equipment and get cash. And so there's lots of different options. You can also get gold in this game. You can do a gold mining strategy where you don't worry about cows at all, and you just try to get as much gold as you can get. So it's a really cool game because there are a lot of different routes you could take to score points, and there's just a good level of player interaction where I care about what other people are doing on their turns, because what they do could impact me. They're not necessarily attacking me, but the things that they do are going to have a big impact on the decisions that I can make. So it's a really great game. Pioneer Days. Okay, my number 43 is the game that has dropped the furthest in my top 50. It's still in my top 50, but this game has dropped the furthest since the last year. This game has dropped 29 spots. So that's a pretty significant drop. It was in the top 20 last year, and now it's down at 43. And that game is Dice Town. This was at one time was in my top 10 games of all time. And this is a dice chucking game where you're rolling dice and you're trying to make the best poker hand. The dice are super cool because they each have card faces, like poker cards on them. The dice are awesome. A couple things that I've come to sort of not like so much about this game. One, when you're playing with 4 or 5 people, and it's better with more people, everybody's shaking these cups with the dice, and it's just really loud. And it's sort of chaotic, and like everybody's going at the same time, which is good because it makes the game go quickly, but it just can be kind of a noisy, it's not a quiet experience at all. And the other thing is, there's a lot of times people are stealing your stuff, because if you gather up the most queens in your poker hand on that particular turn, you get to steal from other people. And it just sucks when people are stealing your stuff, because either you get off to a big lead and then everybody comes after you, or sometimes you could be in last place, but maybe people know you have one good card, right? And so they're coming after you. Or maybe for whatever reason, you did something to them earlier in the day, and there's this meta game where they don't even care about winning or losing the game. They're just coming after you because they're mad at you for some reason. But this game, the last few times I've played it, it hasn't been as fun for me, because I think maybe because I was doing pretty well when I was playing and I won a few times, and so now as soon as we start playing, people come after me right at the beginning to try to steal all my stuff. And so Dice Town's pretty cool, but it's still in my top 50. It's a great game, but it's not quite as high as it used to be. All right, number 42 on my list is a classic family party game. And I actually learned this game from my Aunt Michelle at a family retreat that we did in West Virginia one year. And this is another game, it's new to my list, but it's not new to my shelf. And that's Apples to Apples. Before I didn't have this on my list because I kind of thought, well, party games are party games, no big deal. But I actually like Apples to Apples a lot. And what I've come to find out is one of the reasons maybe it wasn't as high before, we tend to play Apples to Apples Junior or Apples to Apples, the kids version, a lot more because we're playing with kids. And the words in there are much simpler and easier, so everybody understands. I actually like it, so that's fine, right, when you're playing with kids. But I actually like the Apples to Apples, the base game, way better. And I find that when I'm playing that, I actually enjoy that game a lot. And the challenge with kids is they may get names. It may say Pablo Picasso or Maya Angelou or something, and they don't know who that is. So you can't really play the main version of the game with kids because there's a lot of words that they just don't know. But what I've found is if you can get a group of adults together to play that game, and I like to play it more as a thinky game than necessarily a party game. I actually love that game a lot. There's so many games that we have and that come along that are kind of a rip-off of Apples to Apples. They steal that base system and they've copied it. And there's a reason for that, and that's because Apples to Apples is great, right? And so this game, I think, was underappreciated before by me. I didn't have it on my list, but again, with Sidetracks now, I teach these types of games to people a lot more, and I think I've come to appreciate them a lot more. And so Apples to Apples is a great game. All right, number 41, the last one on this list, is a game that was in my top 50 before. It's dropped a little bit, but pretty much the same. It's dropped 8 spots, not much difference. And this game is called Medieval Academy. And Medieval Academy has some really cool cartoony art. It's a really fun sort of jousting, medieval times type theme. And it's a really fun party game, or not party game, but a family game, a game that you can play with your kids and anybody can play. But it's got one of my favorite mechanics in games, and that's card drafting. And in card drafting, you deal out, everybody gets a hand of cards, and you pick one and pass the rest to your neighbor. And then you're going to pick another one and pass the rest to your neighbor and pick another one. And I love card drafting because it kind of mitigates the fact if I get a great hand, okay, and my neighbor has a really bad hand, well, I'm only getting one of those great cards, and then I got to give them away. And if they have a really bad hand, they're only getting one of those bad cards, and then they're going to give it away. And so it's sort of self-balancing. I heard Z Garcia on the Dice Tower mention that about another game, and I thought, you know what? That's absolutely right. That's a great thing about card drafting, and one of the reasons I love it is because it's kind of a self-balancing thing. But the other thing I like about this one is you get 5 cards in your hand, and you're actually only, I think it's 5, and you're only playing 4 each turn. And so you can decide, you know, after I've decided which cards I'm keeping, as other players are playing, you're also having to decide which ones of those am I actually going to play. And so it gives you that extra level of decision making, and you can tactically adjust your strategy on the fly and sort of adapt to what other players are doing. And like some other games, this one has sort of short-term points and long-term points. This one also has places on the board where you can go and gain points, but there are also places on the board where you can lose points. And so if you don't want to be last in those losing point areas, or you're, you know, it's going to offset everything good you're doing everywhere else. So I like all of that. You know, the short term versus long term, the positive versus the negative, and so you have to sort of balance all that in your decision making, and it makes for a really great game. But it's still a very lightweight family game, fun to play. So there you go. That's 41 through 50, the first 10 of my top 50. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you find something in there. We have all these games in the Sidetracks library, so if any of them sound really interesting to you, come on down. Love to teach them to you. See you on the next one.